And the weather brought to you by BF&M.
BF&M would like to share an important message about underinsurance. When's the last time you thought about your home insurance value, also known as your sum insured? If the answer is never, or even several years ago, you're likely at risk of being underinsured. Underinsurance occurs when your home is insured for the wrong amount. How does this happen? The cost to rebuild your home increases each year due to factors such as inflation and the rising cost of construction materials. Or perhaps you've completed renovations and haven't factored them in. If the coverage value you've set for your home insurance policy is less than the actual cost to rebuild your home, then when you need to make a claim, you risk only getting a proportion of it paid. This can cause significant financial hardship. The number one reason most homes in Bermuda are underinsured is because homeowners set their sum insured and don't revisit it each year at the time of renewal. BF&M want to ensure you're informed and have the coverage you need when you need it. Learn more about the risks of underinsurance at bfm.bm/underinsurance.
This weather update is provided by the Bermuda Weather Service, sponsored by BF&M.
All right, thank you. Gray weather-wise for tonight's increasing cloud and some showers expected for this evening. Southerly winds, light to moderate. Tonight's low 70. Friday, cloudy to speak with and real thick clouds, in fact. More shower activity too. High 78, a low 71. Winds out of the south to southwest for Friday. And for the weekend, mainly dry and bright for Saturday, becoming wet later on. Winds from the northeast and high for Saturday 76, a low at 69. Sunday, mostly cloudy skies, more rain, heavy at times. Will ease later on though for Sunday. Sunday's high 77, low 71. Next week, Monday, sunny spells, more wind and rain in the AM. South to southwesterly winds, high 78, low 72 for Monday. Relative humidity right now stands at 72%.
This weather update was provided by the Bermuda Weather Service, sponsored by BF&M.
And thanks to the folks at BF&M and the Bermuda Weather Service.
94.9 Bermuda. Our 95.
And it's time now for a motion to adjourn with MP Chris Famous and Dwayne Robinson.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Thursday, November, what's today's date, Don?
4th already.
The 4th.
Already. Knocking
How
on
you
Christmas
doing, brother?
doors.
Doing nice to actually see you in person.
I haven't seen you. I have to check my schedule. This is the last time you guys came up here.
Well,
I forgot what you look like.
Well, due to COVID and precautions.
That's what it was.
First of all, good afternoon to the people of Bermuda.
Yes.
Unfortunately, once again, we are beginning today on a sad note. We want to wish condolences to the family of not one but two men who have lost their lives. Three men have lost their lives on the road of the last week, especially the Martin and Darrell family and all of the Dandytown family on the loss of Jatino Martin yesterday. A very kind young man, nothing but good remarks from everybody who knew him. And I want to give a special shout out to his dad, who used to be a co-worker of mine. So we just implore you, whether you're driving or you're riding, please, Bermuda, please go slow. Pay attention to not just what you're listening to or your phone. Most importantly, pay attention to what's in front of you, what's coming in the other direction, and what's behind you, because a small little mistake can lead to something that none of us want. So on that note, today's show, we are very pleased to have as our guest one of Bermuda's own eminent scientists, son of the soil, and someone I can say is a family member, Dr. David Chapman. How you doing, Doctor?
Greetings to you. Greetings, Brother Famous, MP Famous, I should say. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. We can hear you loudly, chap.
Okay.
And you're calling in from where, Mike?
I see now. I think I'm gonna have to get off the line
No,
until my Bermudian accent kicks back in.
yeah, well, I'm sorry. We could switch. We're like that. We're flexible.
Listen, man, you have to teach in front of whatever it is, numbers of young people every day. You invariably your turn and your enunciation changes.
Well, there was a time that when we used to hear Bermudians who lived abroad for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, they came back and suddenly now they speaking like the Queen's cousin. You're like, what? But for those who actually have to climatize, not just weather-wise, but socially in those environments, invariably your enunciation does alter. I wouldn't say change totally, but it's what it is, right? There's nothing wrong with that. It shows you're able to adapt. Is able to.
I don't think there's anything you can do about it, because really, when I'm speaking, I probably don't even hear it. And when I'm in front of the classroom, the students always ask me, where am I from? So, no matter who you're speaking to, everybody hears that slight difference.
Yeah, well, that's that, and that is one of the beauties of quote unquote Queen's language, is that there's so many different dialects of the standard English language. So, anyway, we didn't come here to talk about enunciation and elocution and all those big words. What we're talking about today is a clear and present danger called climate change. And for many, this is something, I wouldn't say new, but something that they're now more aware of. But for persons such as yourself, you've dedicated your entire life, or a good portion of your entire life, to not just educating yourself about the environment, but educating the public about your environment. And today, we want to give you the platform to further speak on the issue that you have been raising, and brought to the public via Royal Gazette last week, about the tipping point which we see ourselves at. So, sir, you have the floor.
Well, thank you for having me on. I think, for me, Bermuda has a lot of talented people, and when it comes to because of the nature of our beautiful island and the way that we grow up and being very in touch with nature, all of us in Bermuda, we enjoy the outdoors so much, as we have a beautiful summertime, and we have livelihoods that are very much connected to the environment. Bermudians, people, like many other island people, enjoy this sort of special connection to nature and to the environment that it's very hard to articulate to other people, from different parts of the world who might not have that same sort of special connection. Humans in general, we all have a special connection to nature, because hence why we call it Mother Nature. It's our sustainer and our provider physically. And but in Bermuda, as you know, you've traveled around the Caribbean, we have that sort of special connection. And as a result, we have a lot of talented people who have chosen to go into fields of study connected to the environment. So whether that is in environmental science, like myself, whether you have, just off the top of my head, engineers, waste engineers, some of the professionals that are working in the civil service, in government, at the Tynes Bay Incinerator, or at the Ministry of the Environment, Agriculture and Fisheries, you name it. We have so many talented and highly educated professionals in the energy fields. And I think that, along with myself, they will have very much a lot to do with how Bermuda itself responds to the future in regards to this climate change issue. The thing about climate is that climate is different than weather. So for a lot of us as humans, it kind of can, go underneath the radar. So everything can seem quite fine and quite normal until you get, an extraordinary hurricane season, or you get an extremely powerful hurricane, and people then wonder, and they'll wonder and say, well, I wonder if this is because. And you don't really have a way of tying those things in directly, because the way that the weather works, the way that climate works, is extremely complicated. That's how nature is. But people will continue to wonder that, and we need to be prepared for that in Bermuda, because our populations, being on this island that I mentioned earlier, can be quite vulnerable to those extremes if and when they do happen. And as I said, luckily on the island we have so many people that are extremely educated, as well as extremely committed. There's people who are not, in those fields, but all of us like to enjoy the environment. If we want to continue to enjoy it, I thought it was necessary to add a little local attention, because as I was reading the news and as I do, I try to keep current. I wasn't seeing much attention on climate, and I know it is, but when you're abroad, you can kind of only look through some of the major news outlets, whether it's the Royal Gazette or whatever social media and radio you might listen to, and I really didn't see much. So hence why I decided to just write that quick opinion piece. I know there are groups that are trying to drive with the energy that COP26 is providing. I was contacted by my cousin Glenn Fubler, and I know that he's put together, or him and others have put together this Bermuda Climate Action Network, which is more like a citizens-based driver and sort of committee to try to do things locally. So it's really just to add energy to what's already going on. I'm very hesitant to. Go ahead.
Let me read something, an excerpt from your piece, if possible. Hello?
I'm still there.
Okay, I'm going to read an excerpt from your piece last week. Let's be direct and clear. The information coming out of global environmental bodies in the run-up to the COP26 of the parties in Glasgow does not paint a positive outlook. For example, the United Nations Environmental Program 2021 Emissions Gap report makes it clear that at this moment in time, national plans by major governmental powers across the world to cut carbon do not meet what climate experts say is needed to prevent dangerous climate change. That's a very stark warning. And
it is.
And I think, and in listening to some of the speakers at COP26, particularly Honorable Prime Minister Mia Mottley, Sir David Attenborough, we're on a trajectory that, like, even if we stop using fossil fuels like today, it was already too late. What say ye?
Yeah. Well, I agree, and when I don't like to use the word too late, and even how I've seen the flyer that you put together, and I said it would be a good talking point because you put save our environment. Really, it's our environment that saves us, but according to all of the reports, because this is when I was doing my PhD, and I started my PhD in 2008, and now it's 2021. My PhD was heavily citing things like the Kyoto Protocol and Sustainable Development Goals and so on and so on. Now it's 2021, and there hasn't been much concrete action that these major governments have really been able to commit to, and many of the developing nations who have an issue with the way that they are being targeted because they haven't had the chance to develop using fossil fuels like the more developed nations. And so they are saying things like they want to still commit to using coal, and coal is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. But they're not the only one, because Britain has also talked about allowing some opening up of new coal plants and stuff like that. So to make a long story short, as you said, according to, you have these two camps. You have the scientists and the climate scientists, and then you have the governments and obviously big business, and then you have us as the consumers. There hasn't been much concrete action, and with that in mind, if the models that predict the way that climate can change and the increasing temperatures of this climate, then, as you said, we're already kind of way behind. And so it's more so about preparing rather than stopping anything at this point. It's about making concrete, tangible steps where people can manage and remediate impacts as they potentially do happen. This is why I was trying to say in the beginning that climate is funny, because you could have a year, 2 years where there's no change in your particular local environment, whereas another part of the world will have, be suffering from serious impacts. And even then, it will be hard to pin them down to climate change. You always have the climate deniers. And so for Bermuda, it's really important that those three camps that we talked about, government, business, and the citizenry themselves, do the best they can to be prepared in the event of things changing. Those people that are closest to the environment, I'm sure, already say that they can potentially see different changes. And so, yeah, we need to make sure that we're prepared in whatever way we can.
So what steps for the public that's listening in, what steps would you advise them as for preparation?
Well, as I said, and this is where I was trying to lead also, is that luckily, because of Bermuda's well-developed status, highly educated population, I know that there's already information and it's on the radar of the countries, and it's been mentioned in the Bermuda Plan, and then it's more than mentioned, although I suggested in my article that a lot of the specific remediation targets are not necessarily there, but they may be embedded more in specific like planning documents that I'm not really familiar with. We know that Bermuda has just had this large focus on developing an energy plan, so that's important as well. But really, as we know, often it's those that are the most vulnerable, that's the elderly, that are those people that are on the lower economic brackets of our society, that have to live in different places, that may not be as resilient to some of the changes that may happen, that will probably be impacted the most. To put that plainly, what does that look like? So let's say you did have a summer that anecdotally people already, say at times it seems like it is getting hotter. While those people who do not have the money to, have air conditioning in their home or live in a more urban environment, environments that heat up more and don't have access to, shade from trees and from nature, those are the ones that will be impacted the most. Nursing homes and elderly care homes, which may not be as well funded as other elderly care homes. The design of the facilities may be, historically not be prepared to handle, extremes of heat. So these are the things that we need to be looking out for as a community, and it's going to take a collective effort. There's no one person with one skill set of expertise that could handle looking into all the different areas. So those threats need to be identified and need to be, think measures need to be put in place just in case.
So, let me ask you this question as well. I know you wrote a series of books called Daddy and Me books. I think it was like 4 books, if I'm not correct, if I'm not
5
mistaken.
books in the series,
5
Daddy and
books.
I Explore. Yep.
Daddy and I.
Daddy
Sorry,
and I
sorry.
Explore.
I know the word daddy.
Fine. Yep.
From yesterday, someone posted on Facebook. It was a picture of a crab, and I didn't know if it was a local crab or a foreign crab. But a picture of a crab, and they said, "Oh, remember the days when we used to see these crabs walking across the street all the time, and we used to go out and catch them, or we used to do this, or we used to see." And then it started this whole string of conversations about certain trees or insects that we now see anymore. So we don't see, I shouldn't say we hardly, let me make sure I phrase that correctly. We hardly see Bermuda oranges anymore. We hardly see Bermuda lemons. Yesterday, one of my coworkers said he got stung by a bee. I said, what, a bee, a honeybee, or a doctor bee? He said, oh, if it was a doctor bee, it would have kept stinging me. No one's seen a doctor bee in a long time. We hardly see crabs. Well, the 4-legged crabs. And there's certain other, I guess you'll say, wildlife, for lack of a better term, that we hardly see. I didn't say they're not there, but we hardly see them. What is that indicating to us, Doctor?
Well, I think part of why we hardly see things is that potentially the places that people go, they won't see these things if they're not venturing into the environments where these things live. So, for example, when I was in Bermuda the last time before I passed at my mother, I think that was in August 2020, and I led a tour down Ferry Reach, and you definitely see lots of doctor bees which live, amongst all the fennel and stuff. Doctor bees like to build paper nests in that sort of area, and there were lots of doctor bees in that area. But at the same time, if people don't venture into those areas, then you're not going to see them. Now, perhaps when we were younger, there were more areas like that, more areas where we had, wilderness, if we want to call it that, because Bermuda is really a false wilderness, because most of the different trees and things that we see are quite contrived. There is not really that many native and endemic species, and so we have the government departments and different organizations like the Bermuda National Trust who do great jobs of trying to, create these environments that are more akin to what would have been there before. The point is, it's the human impact. It's human impact that has a huge role. There's nothing fancy about it. We all know that the more humans and the way that we interact with the environment normally ends up being a negative thing. And we have such large impacts. And Bermuda, because it's such a small place, it's an island with very sensitive and delicate ecosystems. The more we interact and the more we impact it, the end result will probably be, as you said, not seeing a lot more things. Luckily, our marine environment, because we have such a professional and highly educated population, has been spared in so many ways. Now, a lot of people will say that really our marine environment is suffering also, but as you know, if you travel throughout the Caribbean, Bermuda has actually quite a very progressive conservation regime. But as we start to do more on the land and there's less land available, we're going to find that we're going to impact the marine environment even more so as well. Hence, we see things like the overfishing of sharks and things like that affecting the seagrass population through sharks not being as present and not being able to eat as many of the turtles. So it's that human impact. Unfortunately, when it comes to climate change, as you said, for Bermuda, even though I wrote about it in my thesis, and you can look at the different energy reports, Bermuda punches very far above its weight, so its carbon footprint is extremely high for its size. But even if Bermuda was to go 100% green, even if that was somehow possible, that would not have an impact on the way that climate change could impact us, because that's just not how it works. It's not a localized thing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Rather patterns, hurricanes travel from the center of the Atlantic Ocean in our region, and then they move up. So if we have extremes of high temperature which generate more hurricanes, then Bermuda's going to suffer, even if it's 100% renewable energy, on island. So we have this job of, one, making sure that our local impact doesn't or is as lessened as much as possible, so we can enjoy the environment, as you said, and our children can enjoy being out in nature, and not just being out in nature, but enjoying the full experience that, I don't want to get too spiritual, but that connection that humans have with nature that you mentioned, that people mention, seeing a crab, people see the red crabs, but how many people have seen things like mangrove crabs? Okay. Do you know what a mangrove crab is?
I'm from back of town. Then ask them country crabs. We're going to go to...
I say, go ahead.
Sorry, we have to go to a quick break for a news break, and then we'll come back, and then we'll continue this and take some calls, and we'll have one of our other guests, and we'll talk about these mangrove, what they call, like Sasquatch, was it imaginary stuff? Mangrove crabs. All right, we'll be right back, Doctor.
You're locked to Power 95, Bermuda's big station, at 94.9 FM, a Bermuda Broadcasting Company station.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gray Miners with your top stories to the hour, brought to you by Butterfield.
Research, trade, and manage your investments anytime, anywhere with Butterfield's self-directed online brokerage. Invest and trade stocks in real time independently, or speak with Butterfield's team of experienced advisors who can provide professional guidance on investment decisions to help you realize your financial goals. Contact us via email at invest@butterfieldgroup.com or call us on 299-3817 to get started. Your platform for growth. This is Investments by Butterfield. Butterfield Asset Management Limited is licensed to conduct investment business by the Bermuda Monetary Authority.
The Bermuda Police Service thanking those witnesses who have already come forward to assist with the investigation regarding the island's latest road fatality. However, a renewed witness appeal is being issued seeking specific information about the movements of the two vehicles involved in Wednesday morning's fatal collision. The investigating officer is particularly interested in speaking with anyone who may have seen a black Yamaha NVX motorcycle traveling west along North Shore Road through the Flats Village area towards Rubis Tessera's North Shore service station around 9 a.m. Wednesday, as well as anyone who may have seen a blue Peugeot 306 car traveling east along North Shore Road towards the same place at the same time. Members of the public with relevant information or dash cam footage are asked to call Constable Noah Harvey on 247-1309-211 or email nharvey@bps.bm immediately. The couple charged with breaching the government COVID-19 quarantine regulations made another appearance in Magistrates Court this morning. Lawyer Mark Daniels, who represents the pair, requested the matter be rescheduled for a later date due to scheduling conflicts with another trial taking place in the Supreme Court. The trial was adjourned to December 13th and 14th. You'll recall Sophia Cannonier and Michael Watson are charged with refusing to comply with a mandatory quarantine order as directed by a health officer by leaving their Devonshire home before permitted, while Cannonier separately is charged with allowing unauthorized people into her home. These offenses are alleged to have happened on the 11th of July. They are also accused of failing to comply with a mandatory order and failing to fill out a travel authorization. They deny all charges. And those were your top stories to the hour, brought to you by Butterfield.
Now back to Motion to Adjourn with MP Chris Famous and Dwayne Robinson.
Yes, and we're back. Doctor, how art thou?
Still there.
Dr. Chapman, I presume.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, lad. So,
Okay,
Doc,
great.
tell me, how is life? How's the family? I should have started. How's the family? How's everything in UK?
UK is getting a bit cold right now. You know, it's getting. We just had the clocks turn back, so once that happens, um, you know, you have them dark and cold nights. It's not the most enjoyable place when it regards to weather, but otherwise than that, it's a positive place. My family is good, and I have family in Bermuda as well. My son Xavier, who was one of the participants in that Alpha Utillion, he was one of the finalists. And my daughter Zen Joseph, so they're enjoying that Bermuda life. So family is good.
And my little cousins, Judah and Asante.
Asante is good. She's finishing off her degree in physiotherapy this year, and Judah is doing excellent in the program at Balco. He's one of the apprentices in the Balco program. He's not in your department. He's not in that power production and that side. He's with the real engineers, you know.
Oh, my
With the
bad.
real engineers.
Hold on. Let me call my department. Hey, guys. They said we're not real. Turn this lights off. Stop the engines. Stop the engines right now. Yeah, that's good. I mean, I'm so proud of him because I've seen him. He was there a few summers ago, and of course his mom says, "Hey, look out for your little cousin." You know, I saw him a couple of times, and he was doing quite all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a
He
video.
really enjoys that, and I enjoy that environment for him.
Yeah.
Being around such accomplished men and women, getting that practical, hands-on experience that's going to be vital when we link to things like the environment. Extremely vital to have that next generation with that practical skill set to solve problems.
Yeah, because the thing is, just a slight. Do we have Dwayne on the line?
Yes, you do.
Paging Dwayne. Anyone seen Dwayne Robinson?
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes. I'm sorry, I forgot you were there, sir. Dr. Chapman, let me introduce you to my co-pilot, Dwayne Robinson, Dr. David Chapman.
Nice to meet you, Doctor. I'm sorry for joining me in late. Had a few tactical difficulties.
No, that's your usual time, Dwayne.
See, and this is why I started with the doctor when he said about the real engineers part, because you see.
So I'll turn you over to Dwayne for some questions.
Okay. He's not as coming in as loud as you are, but I'll try to listen.
You got to speak up, Dwayne.
I heard, yes, definitely. I can't wait to be back in the studio. Can you hear me, Doctor?
I can hear you.
Okay. I don't know what's been discussed previously, but I just really wanted to hear from you. What do you think of some, because I know you mentioned a lot of long-term solutions, but what do you think of some short-term solutions that can be implemented to kind of lead up to the long-term plan for climate change?
Okay. I think to be direct, it's all about preparedness, because as I said, if we're focusing specifically on climate change is such a variable thing. You know, there's nothing you can pinpoint your hand on and say, oh, next summer's going to be extremely hot summer, so we should do this or we should do that. So it's more about preparation. And when it comes to immediate steps that we can prepare for, I talked about it in my article. Some of those things, whether we like it or not, have to kind of be embedded in the system. So, for example, if we're talking about, I mentioned things like making sure that places that are susceptible to what we call the urban heat island effect, which is when you have lots of concrete and particularly asphalt, which is a more of a heat sink and heat radiator than concrete, we need to make sure that those areas are prioritized when it comes to cooling measures. So, for example, the city of Hamilton should be, and I'm sure they are. I'm not questioning whether or not. I'm just putting these things out there. They are directly looking at places that are like that and are habited. Now, so for example, the city of Hamilton obviously will be prone to get hot, but people don't always live in every part of the city of Hamilton. It's those areas where you have a high residential population that they would have to make sure that they have things put in place, such as putting in trees which provide natural shading, making sure that the buildings are incentivized, new buildings are incentivized to have passive sort of cooling measures put in place, things like that. Island-wide, we need to move away from some of the things that are going to exacerbate issues that may arise with climate change. I know for me, living in Crowell, for example, you see firsthand when there is rainfall, the impacts of all of the hard surfaces that generally people tend to put in place in their houses now. And what that does is it creates a lot of runoff, and that can create a lot of basically flood-like conditions. So anyone that drives from that Shelley Bay stretch up Crowell Hill knows that in the types of rainfall that we get in Bermuda, that you can have some real flood-like conditions. Now, obviously, it's not as bad as some of the other areas that are prone to flooding, like in Bakery Lane and those areas, because that's a natural sink. But you still can get some serious flood-like conditions. And what are we doing as a collective community to ensure those things are not happening? Are we opting for surfaces that are more traditional, like lawns, things that actually drain and soak away water, rather than always having a concreted terrace sort of approach? And then again, how is the government departments like Works and Engineering looking at that? Because if climate change, if we did have a particularly extreme season of rainfall, those types of things, yes, right now might not seem like they could become dangerous, but they actually potentially could, and they can keep people off the roads, can stop people from going to work. I'll say this also, and then I'll let you come back in. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, and I write about this in my article, that a lot of the things that we used to do as an older generations, the older population in Bermuda, the way that we designed things was because they didn't have access to things like air conditioners. So they had to learn how to cool their homes passively. Nowadays, it's very hard pressed to find things like the vertical shutters and the horizontal shutters that close. But as we know, when it's particularly hot, those sorts of passive technologies can really do a lot to help keep a house not just cool, but also well ventilated. And they have the added bonus, of course, during hurricanes, that there's nothing better to keep your air pressure balanced in your house than having those sorts of blinds and different things on the house. Now, we don't want to go too far probably to have those things mandated in planning, because that takes away people's choice. But we definitely want to have education campaigns whereby, remember, a lot of the young people, they won't even know that some of those things existed nowadays. People, if we think about the very young generation, people that are under 10, some of them may never even seen blinds like that, really, the operational ones, the ones that I'm talking about. So there's a lot we can do as a community, as individuals, and there's a lot we can do, obviously, from a more systematic, embedded approach.
Thank you for that. You mentioned the collective and the community a few times, right? And I just wonder, I remember coming up in school, we were taught about global warming, we were taught about, the effects on the environment. But why do you believe that, the community is still not quite as engaged when it comes to, the effects of global warming? And how do you think we can get more of the community engaged?
It's a question. I mean, I'm not sure how old you are, but me, I'm in my Mr. Favors is chuckling. I'm in my late 40s, and the reality is that when I was in university, we started to learn about things like ozone depletion. But global warming and that being a subject actually did not come up until I was well out of school. Now, the global warming has been known about for a long time, but in terms of the being a large, huge international global issue, really it's actually quite new. So it's a young person's thing. It's a young person's generation thing because they're the ones that are growing up in an environment where the information is now coming, and that educational process, they are probably much more ahead of the game than it is for us in this in the older generation. So in saying that, what can we do? Well, we need to continue that process. It's going to happen regardless. Why it's not often sticking in people's heads is because it's such a generalized thing, and people don't always have a measure of the way that climate impacts them directly in places like Bermuda, especially places that are as well developed as Bermuda. So resources are not, that hard to come by. But if it did impact Bermuda much more in a more negative way, then assuredly you would start seeing people having this on their, much more on their radar. Unfortunately, the world doesn't work like that. So again, as I said, it's those people that are in the less developed countries, those people that are in areas that are more susceptible to climate change, that will notice it. I have talked to some directly and some indirectly. So, for example, in the article that I wrote, we have you mentioned eminent scientists. I don't think that's a word that should be used towards me, but we do have a lot of top scientists in Bermuda, top researchers, and one of those was that Murdoch, and he wrote a comment underneath my article where he spoke about the monitoring of Bermuda's coral reefs, and that that is not really done on a really wide systematic basis. If anyone would know, he would know. I talked to Dr. Robbie Smith, a real eminent scientist in Bermuda. I saw him when I was running on the tracks during the time that I was in Bermuda for my mother's funeral arrangements and so on and so on. And he mentioned the sensitivity of Bermuda's mangroves, because that's what my research was in, and how they're not being monitored, that a lot of the research that we need towards that is not happening. So we don't have a measure, is what I'm trying to say, of how things might actually be changing. And things may be changing, but if you're not measuring them, you actually won't know it. And so for the average Bermudian, if the coral reefs are being damaged because of global warming, if the mangroves are being pushed back due to sea level rise, the average Bermudian probably won't even notice it until it affects them, until they see fish stocks going down, until they have a hurricane and all of a sudden a coastal area is more susceptible because there were mangroves there that there weren't before. And so these are some of the things that we need to be doing now. It's that monitoring and embedding it into our educational processes. Does the Bermuda College have a dedicated focus on climate change and the impact on the environment from climate? If Bermuda is not a center of it, then obviously, there's a problem with that.
Dwayne?
Yeah, sorry, I just had to make sure because just having a little technical. But yeah, thank you for that. In something that you mentioned in your article was setting up a group or an authority to tackle this specific issue of global warming and climate change. And I thought that was very interesting because it's definitely something that I could get behind. But how do you anticipate, or I know this is more of a legislation question, but how do you envision it just as a rough draft? How do you envision that particular thing being implemented, and how would it operate?
Well, when you look at the COP26 goals, they have these like 4 basic principles that they kind of put there to have like some landmark principles of what they need to achieve at COP26. And one of the things that they talk about is number 3 out of the 4 is mobilize finance, because they recognize obviously that finance drives change, isn't it? So for me, there could be lots of these types of discussions that we have. There could be lots of, citizens action group. I mentioned the Bermuda Climate Action Network that is going to, I'll speak about what they're trying to do a little bit later. So you can have, all of those sorts of things. But unless you have some real power and some real energy and effort behind that, then we probably won't see some of the preparedness that we is probably owed to this particular issue. And that's why I mentioned that having a core focus. I remember when I was doing my PhD, and that is the first time, I cannot remember, I don't want to state the wrong premier that it came under. I'm pretty sure it was Alex Scott. I could be wrong. But that has been the first time that we had a ministry dedicated towards energy. And what that did was it created just this buzz around the question of energy. We had the energy white paper, energy green paper, and that legacy of that now is what we see in the most recent huge energy consultations that have gone on in Bermuda. So it's when government, unfortunately, because of the way Bermuda operates as a society, we know that government drives a lot. That's just the reality. That can be a positive thing, and then, as we know, it can be a negative thing. So if you have that type of energy also put towards climate, I think that would do a huge favor in terms of making sure that the actions are concrete. And I propose the idea of some sort of independent body, because it needs to be that it can't be politicized. And the way that COP26 and climate in general has been politicized is one of the big detractors against actual things happening, And so as depoliticized as it could possibly be would be a positive thing. It doesn't take much, because even when they had the Sustainable Development Task Force, it wasn't a large department. Persons like Charles Brown, they accomplished a lot underneath Alex Scott and so on and so on. So it doesn't take a huge staffing and so on and so on. It just takes some commitment towards having a funded body where a group of individuals, a group of highly professional types of individuals that we have in Bermuda can focus on this as their daily work. We have all of these young people who are going to be going to school and who are going to be educated in these areas. And if we don't have a way to mobilize that energy, you're going to find they're going to go other places to mobilize that energy, which I had to do myself in a lot of ways. So that is why I mentioned that. That would be a good way. We want to see concrete things happen, isn't it? We don't want it just to be a talking shop.
Yeah,
because climate change is climate change, and I'll finish with this little quick statement. Climate change, as we know, is a very controversial thing. You have a group of people who feel that it's not happening, and as I said, it's very hard to put your finger on. But it's the moment when the predicted negative impacts do happen that you want to have things in place. It's like tsunami preparation. You never want it to happen, but you want to be prepared just in case it does happen.
Yeah, I think the if you took a pie chart, right, and you said who believes in climate change and who denies climate change. If you did a pie chart 20 years ago and a pie chart now, it's going to be a vast difference, because very few people are actually in the category of a climate denier at this point, for lack of a better term, because as you said, down in the Caribbean, over the last few years, quite a number of islands have been hit. I mean, like literally hit hard with Category 5 going on Category 6 hurricanes. And they have seen the power of what a Category 5 hurricane sitting over your island for 45 hours will do to your country. It will like obliterate your country. And so they themselves are not in denial. I've been to several conferences and everything is about climate resilience. And the challenge is that, as you said, we who live in this region who are affected by hurricanes are not the ones contributing to the problem, right? But then you have countries such as...
Not in that large scale.
Right. Not in that large scale, correct. Then you have countries such as Russia or China and America and England to a lesser extent who are contributing to this. Brazil, even with the deforestation, who are like, well, we don't know if you could tell when somebody's not, they ain't gonna do it, right? That they talk all the way around it, and they're not gonna do it. And to your point you made earlier about marine environment, I was in one island and the Virgin Islands, and they were told me, "Oh, do you want some turtle soup?" And I'm like, "Nope." And they was like, "Well, you don't eat turtle soup?" I'm like, "No." They said, "You don't have turtles in Bermuda?" I said, "Yeah, we do, but we don't eat them, right?" And we, years ago we banned catching turtles. Now we're banning catching certain sharks, and we have a lobster season. In other countries, they have no lobster season, and in some countries they have. There's no ban on parrotfish, right? So yes, we are to some degrees light years ahead of our counterparts in the Caribbean. And yesterday today, I'm like, that this parrotfish are gonna just be going in a little while, right? And then you look in Cayman Islands, for example, they're now getting bleaching of their coral. Why? Because they ate all the parrotfish. You know what I mean? So I would say this, Doctor, that the work that you have done, the work that you continue to do, the work that your sons and daughters are going to be doing, because I know you're going to instill in them, is vital, because Dwayne has just had a son born earlier this year, a few months ill. Was he 3 months ill now, Dwayne?
A month and a half.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting ill. A month
Don't
and a half.
rush me.
They are going to inherit this earth. The meek shall inherit the earth. And we have to, our generation are in the position now where we have to make sure we're doing what we're doing so these young people can actually see a mangrove crab. But anyway, over to you, Dwayne. We have 4 minutes before we have to close up shop.
No, I agree, and I appreciate the work that you've done, Doctor, for sure, because I do believe that people are rising up. I know we saw a demonstration from young people just earlier this year regarding climate change and global warming. So I do believe that, like you said, it is a young person's sort of battle, because they have come up with this information. But I would say that I believe it's one thing to say, but we have to also make sure that they have a seat at the table to enact some of the changes they wish to make. So I do believe we have, the same classic issue of sometimes some folks who have been around for a long time are not willing to step aside to allow younger, greener shoots to come through and begin the innovation and the change necessary for the, planet that they will inherit, and, their children and children's children will inherit. So I do think it's a wake-up call for us as well, as an island, to say, hey, we need to provide room for the youth, room for young people to not only just make demonstrations and to make change in their own personal lives, but also to provide them an avenue to enact change on the island-wide scale, giving them a seat at the table, as they say. So, again, I'd like to thank you for coming on to the show and bringing this awareness to a very important issue. And hopefully we'll be able to have you back again.
Thank you.
Yes, Doctor, I want to thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Doctor.
I wanted to quickly mention the Bermuda Climate Action Network, and that they're inviting everyone on that weekend. You'll hear more about it, I'm sure, from Friday, November 5th to Monday, November 8th. which includes the Global Climate Day of Action, that they are inviting people to adopt a mindset of we can all play our part in Bermuda, and they're asking people to reflect and mindfully discuss these issues. Wear some green, post on social media. I'm sure you will hear more about it, and that's the sort of local action. But most of the people that I've been introduced to on that network are the elderly, or not elderly, but older, in the older age bracket. The thing about our young people is that they have access to social media, and they don't always have to wait for a seat at that table. They can make a seat at the table either through the, in some sort of social action, or even better, commercial action, which can drive change. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, brother. I will be talking to you soon, and very soon. Brother Dawn, thank you for your time.
Sure. Anytime.
Brother Duane.
Thank you.
Thank you for your half an hour.
Hey, you didn't even let me know, man. Come on.
All right. So we'll be back next week. We will let you know in advance what the show is, and until that time.
Now back to Motion to Adjourn with MP Chris Famous and Dwayne Robinson. Nope.
You're locked to Power 95, Bermuda's big station at 94.9 FM, a Bermuda Broadcasting Company station.
21. Hey, I eat pancake. Man, ice. What up? Hello. Ice cream. Hey. I keep a rocket in my pocket, socket called a pocket rocket. If it's war, we ain't playing games, we get it started. I'm the man, clip it, keep 100. I'm a